Shanann Watts was born on January 10, 1984, in North Carolina, United States. She grew up in a close-knit family and was known from an early age to have a strong personality. Those who knew her often described her as determined, expressive, and deeply invested in the people she loved. Her parents, Frank and Sandra, played a significant role in shaping her upbringing. Family was central to her life, and this value remained consistent throughout her adulthood. She maintained strong connections with her relatives and often spoke openly about her love for them. Growing up, Shanann was not someone who blended into the background. She had a presence that made people notice her. Whether through her communication style or her confidence, she stood out as someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to pursue it. Her early years were relatively typical, but even then, there were signs of resilience. Life would eventually present her with challenges, but the foundation built during her childhood helped shape how she would respond to those moments. Education played a role in her development, though she was often more defined by her personality and interpersonal relationships than by academic achievements alone. She valued independence and worked toward building a life that reflected her goals and ambitions. As she moved into early adulthood, Shanann began focusing more on establishing herself professionally. She explored different opportunities and worked hard to create stability. Like many young adults, she faced uncertainty, but she approached it with determination. One of the defining traits that would continue throughout her life was her desire for structure and control. She preferred organization and often took initiative in situations rather than waiting for things to unfold on their own. This trait would later become more visible in how she managed her home, relationships, and even her online presence. Shannon's early adult life included both successes and setbacks. She experienced financial challenges at times, as well as the pressures that come with trying to build a stable future. These experiences contributed to her sense of responsibility and her drive to improve her circumstances. She was not someone who gave up easily. When faced with obstacles, she tended to push forward rather than retreat. This persistence would later define how she handled much more serious challenges in her life. Her social life was active, and she maintained friendships with people who appreciated her openness and energy. She was expressive and often communicated directly, which could be both a strength and a source of tension depending on the situation. At this stage of her life, Shanann was still discovering who she was and what she wanted. Like many people, her path was not perfectly linear. She adjusted, adapted, and continued moving forward. There was also a strong emotional side to her personality. She cared deeply about relationships and valued emotional connection. This would later play a major role in how she approached marriage and motherhood. As time went on, Shanann began to shape a clearer vision for her future. She wanted stability, a family, and a life that felt meaningful. These goals influenced many of her decisions and guided the direction she took. Her journey was not defined by a single moment, but by a series of experiences that gradually built the person she became. Each challenge, each success, and each relationship contributed to her growth. By the time she approached the next phase of her life, she had already developed many of the traits that people would later recognize: strength, determination, emotional depth, and a strong attachment to family. These qualities would become even more significant as her life evolved. Shanann Watts' adult life was shaped by a combination of ambition, personal challenges, and a strong desire to create stability for herself. As she moved forward from her early years, she focused on building a career and establishing financial independence. She worked in various roles, including positions in sales and customer service. These types of jobs suited her personality. She was naturally communicative, expressive, and comfortable interacting with people. She had the ability to present ideas clearly and engage others in conversation, which became one of her strengths. Over time, she became involved in multi-level marketing, particularly with a health and lifestyle company. This type of work allowed her to combine business with personal storytelling. She didn't just sell products, she shared her life, her routines, and her experiences as part of her work. Her approach to business was deeply personal. She often used social media as a platform to connect with others, promote products, and document her daily life. This created a sense of transparency, where much of her routine was visible to those who followed her. For Shanann, this was more than just income. It was also about identity. It gave her a sense of purpose, structure, and control. She could work from home, manage her own schedule, and feel productive while building something of her own. However, her life was not without significant challenges. At one point, Shanann was diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune condition that can affect multiple systems in the body. This diagnosis had a major impact on her life. Lupus is unpredictable. It can cause fatigue, joint pain, inflammation, and periods of flare-ups that make daily activities difficult. For someone as active and driven as Shanann, this was a serious obstacle. Despite this, she did not withdraw. Instead, she adapted. She spoke openly about her health struggles and incorporated them into her daily narrative. She shared updates, routines, and ways she was managing her condition. This openness allowed her to connect with others who were facing similar challenges. Her response to illness reflected a key part of her personality: resilience. Rather than allowing the diagnosis to define her limitations, she tried to maintain control over what she could manage. She focused on routines, organization, and maintaining a sense of normalcy even when her health made things difficult. This need for structure became more noticeable during this period of her life. She liked planning, she liked order, she preferred knowing what to expect. This extended into how she managed her home, her schedule, and her relationships. At the same time, her personality remained expressive and outward-facing. She was not someone who kept everything inside. She shared her thoughts, her frustrations, and her experiences openly. This openness had both positive and challenging aspects. On one hand, it helped her build connections. People felt like they knew her. They could relate to her struggles and feel inspired by her determination. On the other hand, being so open also meant that her life was more visible and sometimes subject to judgment. Still, she continued. Her work and her personal life were closely intertwined. She often blended the two, using her everyday experiences as part of her professional presence. This created a lifestyle where there was little separation between private and public life. As time went on, she also became more focused on wellness, routine, and creating a stable environment. This was influenced both by her health condition and her personality. She valued consistency, regular schedules, planned activities, clear expectations. These were not just preferences. They were ways of maintaining control in a life that sometimes felt unpredictable due to her health. Financially, like many people working in similar industries, there were ups and downs. Income was not always stable, and this could create pressure. However, she continued to push forward, motivated by her goals and her desire to build a better future. Her determination was one of her defining characteristics. She did not easily accept defeat. She worked through discomfort. She continued even when things were uncertain. Emotionally, she was deeply invested in relationships. She cared about connection, communication, and feeling understood. She valued reassurance and often expressed her feelings directly. This emotional openness meant that she was very present in her relationships. She did not approach them passively. She engaged fully, which sometimes created intensity but also reflected how much she cared. As her life progressed, these traits, resilience, expressiveness, need for control, and emotional depth, became more pronounced. They influenced how she handled challenges. They shaped her decisions. They defined how others experienced her. Her health struggles, rather than diminishing her, became part of her identity in a way that she chose to confront publicly. She turned something difficult into something she could speak about, manage, and incorporate into her life. At the same time, her drive to maintain a certain image of stability and success continued. She wanted things to work. She wanted life to feel organized, purposeful, and secure. This combination, strength and vulnerability, control and openness, made her a complex individual. As she moved into the next phase of her life, these qualities would play a major role in shaping her relationships, particularly when she eventually met Chris Watts. That meeting would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that would bring both hope and, eventually, profound challenges. In the beginning, their marriage reflected many of the expectations people have when starting a new chapter. There was optimism, a sense of partnership, plans for the future. They worked toward creating a home and a shared life. Responsibilities were divided in a way that often reflected their personalities. Shanann tended to take the lead in organizing and planning. Chris followed. This pattern became a defining aspect of their relationship. She managed many aspects of their daily life, schedules, decisions, and long-term planning. She valued order and consistency, and she worked to maintain that within the home. Chris, on the other hand, remained more passive. He did not often challenge decisions. He avoided conflict. He adapted to the structure that was already in place. At first, this dynamic did not appear problematic. In fact, it may have seemed efficient. But over time, patterns like this can create imbalance. Soft ambient tone, subtle tension begins to build. Communication in their marriage reflected these differences. Shanann communicated openly. She expressed her thoughts, her concerns, and her expectations. She believed in addressing issues directly and maintaining clarity. Chris communicated differently. He tended to internalize. Rather than expressing frustration or disagreement, he often kept those feelings to himself. This created a situation where not all thoughts and emotions were shared equally. On the surface, things could appear calm, but underneath, unspoken feelings can accumulate. As their marriage continued, they also worked toward building a family. This was an important goal for Shanann. She valued family deeply and wanted to create a home environment that reflected love, structure, and care. This desire aligned with the values she had carried from her own upbringing. Chris also stepped into the role of a husband and, eventually, a father. From the outside, their life continued to look stable. They shared moments publicly. They appeared together as a couple. They presented an image of unity. But like many relationships, what was visible did not always reflect the full reality. Financial pressures were also part of their life. Managing a household, building a future, and maintaining a certain lifestyle can create stress. These pressures can affect communication, decision-making, and emotional connection. In their case, these challenges were present but not always openly addressed in a balanced way. Shanann often took an active role in trying to manage and improve their situation. Chris continued to follow rather than lead discussions. Again, the pattern remained. Over time, differences in personality, communication styles, and coping mechanisms can begin to create distance. Not always in obvious ways, sometimes it's subtle. A lack of deeper conversation, unspoken frustrations, emotional disconnect that grows gradually rather than suddenly. Despite this, there were still moments of connection, shared experiences, efforts to build a life together, attempts to maintain stability. Relationships are rarely defined by a single consistent state. They move between connection and distance, understanding and misunderstanding. As they moved forward, these dynamics would continue to evolve. The arrival of children would bring new responsibilities, new pressures, and new emotional layers to their lives. And with those changes, the strengths and weaknesses of their relationship would become even more visible. Motherhood was not just a role for her. It was a defining part of her identity. She was deeply involved in their daily lives, organizing routines, managing schedules, and ensuring structure within the home. She valued consistency and believed in maintaining order, especially when it came to raising her children. Her approach to parenting reflected her personality. She was attentive, organized, protective. She documented much of her life as a mother through social media, sharing videos, photos, and updates. These posts showed moments of laughter, milestones, and everyday routines. To those watching from the outside, it often appeared that she had created a stable and loving environment. At the same time, maintaining that level of structure required effort. Managing a household, raising children, working, and dealing with ongoing health challenges placed significant demands on her. Despite this, she continued to push forward. As time went on, pressures within the marriage became more noticeable. Financial strain was one of the factors. Like many families, they faced challenges related to income, expenses, and maintaining their lifestyle. These issues created stress, even if they were not always openly discussed in a balanced way. Communication differences also remained. Shanann continued to express herself openly, often sharing her thoughts and feelings directly. Chris remained more reserved. He avoided confrontation and did not always communicate his internal struggles. This created a gap, one where not all concerns were addressed equally. Over time, that gap widened. Another major shift came with Chris becoming emotionally distant. His behavior began to change. He appeared less engaged, less communicative, more withdrawn. At the same time, he became involved in an extramarital relationship. This marked a significant turning point. While Shanann focused on maintaining the family and addressing issues within the marriage, Chris began to move emotionally in a different direction. In the final months of her life, Shannon's awareness of the changes in her marriage increased. She noticed the distance, she expressed concern, she sought clarity, she attempted to understand what was happening. Her communication during this period showed vulnerability. She questioned the relationship. She expressed confusion about the shift in behavior. She tried to find ways to reconnect. At the same time, she was pregnant with their third child. This added another layer of emotional and physical pressure. Despite the uncertainty, she continued to focus on her family and the future she believed they could still build. The final days were marked by contrast. On one side, there was her effort to maintain normalcy. On the other, there were underlying tensions that had not been resolved. From the outside, much of this remained invisible. There were no clear signs that pointed to what would happen next. After her death, the focus shifted to understanding her life and remembering who she was. She was seen as a devoted mother, a determined individual, someone who faced challenges with persistence. Her social media presence became part of her legacy, offering insight into her daily life, her personality, and her relationships. At the same time, the case raised broader questions about how relationships function beneath the surface, about the importance of communication, about the risks of unaddressed emotional distance. Her story is often discussed not only in the context of the crime, but also as a reflection of real-life complexities. It highlights how a life that appears stable from the outside can contain struggles that are not immediately visible. It shows the impact of imbalance in communication, and it underscores the importance of addressing issues rather than allowing them to remain unspoken. In the end, the life of Shanann Watts is remembered through the roles she held and the way she lived, as a mother, as a partner, as someone who worked to build a life despite challenges. Her story remains part of a larger conversation about relationships, awareness, and the importance of understanding what lies beneath the surface of everyday life. To honor stories like this and keep their memory alive, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Every view helps these stories continue to be told. Like this remind us that not everything is as it seems. Subscribe for more deep dives into real-life cases and stay aware.